And so that tells you that Africa is open for business. The opportunities are there. You know, when people look at Africa, think of the population, think of the middle class, think of the huge opportunities to invest across borders, not just limited by the boundaries of borders. And look at the opportunities for you to be able to invest in a continent with a population that will be the same size of China and India by the last 2050, rapid middle class, a continent that's thriving with young people with lots of things to do. I guess the way I can only summarize it for the continent is what one of the senators, Senator Coons in the United States, said when they were launching their investment program for Africa. He said, think of the next China after China. We were thinking about that. And we think that next China after China is going to be Africa. This is exactly what the Continental Free Trade Area is. Almost $3 trillion of combined GDP. That's the market to focus on. And I think that if we can deal with those issues of access to finance, promote trade finance, and also invest in infrastructure, I can comment on that later on, I think we'll be able to help Africa to double a lot of the intra-regional trade that it's doing right now, which is still very low.
Hello explorers, thanks for joining us again and welcome back to another informative video on our YouTube channel. In this episode, we are looking at the reason why the African free trade is not going anywhere soon. The discussions that are all over the world, focusing on the particular strategic initiative and the importance of this particular agreement and the reason why it should drive Africa forward. However, before that's become effective, there are little barriers that need to be cleared as to make sure that despite the numerous opportunities that the African continent provides or offers the world, basic things need to be put in place to make sure that the continent become not just competitive, but again can actually trade amongst itself. Africa has been discussed in different circles around the world, especially in the international arena and also in the World Economic Forum. However, these basic things that need to be reviewed. The free trade will bring lots of opportunities like a powerful bloc within the African continent, overcoming obstacles and also strengthening trade links between the continent and different countries. Also, it will increase certain areas that will drive growth within the African continent. Manufacturing will be boosted and also trade within countries will also accelerate in different areas. However, there are basic things like the movement of people. Much have been talked about the transportation movement of goods from point A to north, east and south in Africa. However, it's so difficult to see people move within the African continent, which is a major issue that may affect the particular trade. What's happening is that there are more international companies working or doing business within the African continent who have global staff. Those staffs are easy for you to travel from Europe to any African country. You have a free pass, but you do see employees within the continent who hold African passports. It's so difficult for them to move from one country to the other for various reasons. Could be about visa issues, border controls, lots of issues that need to be looked into to resolve this for this particular trade links to be more effective. Secondly, when you look at the transportation network, it is so easy for you to ship things from Western Europe to Africa in different countries across the African continent than you moving the same product between one African country to the other. What is the reason this is happening and why this is so a difficult thing to clear out? Of course, it can be so easy for you to travel from Europe to any African country, and it's so difficult for you to get a visa to travel within one African country to the other. It is costing lots of businesses lots of money to move employees from one region to the other within the African continent. If this is looked into, then the free trade could have some kind of a direction which will be relevant to making sure that the effectiveness of the free trade becomes a reality.
And this can cross borders much more easily than goods. But if we could immediately remove all the difficulties for circulation of people, I will be very happy. We talked about goods. Today, it costs less money to bring a car from Paris to Lagos than from Accra to Lagos. Today we have people in our staff in our headquarters in Morocco. It's much longer for them to get visa. We have a Congolese and Cameroonese guy Cameroonese guy has never been authorized to go to Kenya, and the Congolese one has had to wait for weeks before he got a visa, while our team in Paris was rapidly welcome. That's not the way it should go. These are real-life examples. So when you said earlier that borders will be easier to cross for Africans going into Africa, I think it starts with this. Business people need to travel to create value, to replicate successful business models. Workers need to travel. With all due respect for China, which is a great country, Africa does not need Chinese workers. They need more African workers traveling within Africa. So that's why we are investing in Africa, and we believe this new agreement is, again, only maybe one step, but it's heading definitely in the right direction. First, to remove barriers for circulation of people, and at some point of time, the President just touched a very important topic for us investors, also facilitating money to circulate. Money to circulate and money to be found locally. We need more depth of financing market to provide financing to all kinds of companies. And to this extent, if I need to be a little bit provocative, I would preach in favor of much less currencies and much stronger currencies in Africa. That's maybe euro which has been created in Europe is not the best example, but I think there are some good reasons why it has been created, and I would strongly advocate for much stronger and fewer currencies in Africa.
Much has been talked to about the importance and the advantages that the African free trade will offer the African continent, especially in the different areas. There are different advantages that many professionals have talked about, how Africa is going to benefit in several ways, and talking about the opportunities that the African free trade will bring into the continent. However, there is no one better to explain the benefits to the African people as to how this trade signing is going to impact the continent, other than talking to or having it directly from the mouth of the head of the African Development Bank, which Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. He is actually president of the African Development Bank. He's previously served as the Nigerian Minister of Agriculture and also Rural Development. Before he got appointed, he was the minister around 2010. He also was Vice President of Policy and Partnership for the Alliances for Green Revolution in Africa. He's basically understand the basics and to also drive the African development in different ways. It's involved in different projects and partnership to actually reflect the African case, to explain to the world and to the African people as to the reason how this particular trade agreement will impact the continent. There is no one better to explain this as for you to listen to how this is going to benefit the African continent in different ways.
What are the opportunities, the major opportunities that you see in the signature of this Continental Free Trade Agreement?
Well, first and foremost is that Africa's trade with the rest of the world is so small, maybe about 4%. And what Africa actually exports is essentially a lot of raw materials. So it makes Africa's exports so susceptible to global volatility. And you see all the booms and the busts that we always have with regard to our economies. But what you find is that those countries that do participate in regional markets are the ones that actually have much more stability in terms of their economies. And so building that size of that market is the critical thing. I think that African economies will be able to industrialize better. I think they'll be able to create a lot of jobs. I think to the point you were raising about the issue of global value chains, if you're going to play the global market, the global value chains are important and becomes a stepping stone for you to also get into the global value chains. And quite honestly, I think it will create tremendous amount of jobs, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises that can actually trade all across the borders. Now, for us from the African Development Bank side, we just did an assessment looking at companies and how they look at this continental free trade area. And we were asking them what do they see as the 3 topmost constraints. And what they told us was quite instructive. The first thing that they say is access to finance. The second one is access to power, electricity, because obviously without electricity, what can you do? And the third one is political stability. These three things. So I'll make a few comments about this. If you take the case of access to finance, that access to finance is much more limited, actually, for the small and medium-sized enterprises that you just mentioned. They account for about 75% of all the businesses, but almost only 20% of them actually have access to bank accounts as small and medium-sized enterprises. So getting access to finance for the small guys to play in this big area is the key. So that it's not just a market for the big guys to play. Now, at the African Development Bank, we have a facility we've rolled out. It's a $1 billion facility to support small and medium-sized enterprises. We have so many of our partners that are here that we do lines of credit through to support small and medium-sized enterprises. The second one, I think, is in access to trade finance. Trade finance is going to play a big role. Today, if you look at that, the nature of trade in the continent, only 15 countries account for over 85% of all that intra-regional trade that you're talking about. South Africa is at the top, about 34%. The issue is, how do we expand that? Well, you can't do that unless you have trade finance. And so at the bank, at the African Development Bank, we have a $1 billion facility that we've rolled out, a trade finance facility to support that. And so far, it has supported transactions in about 111 transactions in about 44 countries and mobilized about $7 billion in terms of trade. But in South Africa, for example, we have the first two banks that we are working with about $600 million facility for them to also support trade in about 20 countries. So all I want to say is that access to finance for small and medium-sized enterprises, trade finance, is very, very critical. The last one I want to say on the political stability, why this is important for driving not only Africa to Africa trade, but also foreign direct investment that needs to come into this wider space. We did the Africa Investment Forum, and we have the DBSA here, some of our partners that are here that were with us on that. We did it in November last year in South Africa. And we were able to mobilize $38.7 billion in less than 72 hours. Now think about that. That's a different Africa that you're talking about. And that is about 133% of the aid the continent got in 2017 that we did in about less than 72 hours.
In all of this international conversation, looking at the free trade and advantages that Africa will offer the world, the question is, are the African youths more competitive? Recently, you've heard conversations from all over the world and with African professionals talking about the benefits of the African entrepreneur, the challenges that they face and how they can transform the continent, and also the young professionals, the drive they have and the hunger they have in them to kind of transform the continent, new products. But the question here is, are they having the required finance and the money that are used? Are the banks and also financial institutions within the African continent ready to invest in the young people to kind of let them take the risk to create products, create opportunities, and create new businesses? Are these banks and professional organizations or financial institutions ready to take the risk for the young African business people or the African young professionals? This is the big question that needs to be answered. Of course, the trade agreement is going to bring lots of advantages, but again, those who are really going to be propelling the continent in the future and to compete with their peers in Europe, in America, in different parts across the world, are those young professionals. Are the banks and financial institutions ready to bet for the young Africans in the coming years that everyone is going to be looking at? This is the major question that needs to be answered in different circles. Are they understanding the needs, the people of the young part of the African society, what they want? All of these are questions that need to be answered to make sure that the continent transforms in the next couple of years.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, I think the digital market is, as you rightly said, it's a big one, both for financial inclusion, but also in terms of the service industry.
That's right.
A lot of service industry outsourcing is happening. And Africa, with its young population, I think, as you were saying, there's a lot of young people that can actually participate a lot in that outsourced service industry. But without having a very, very efficient IT infrastructure, you really cannot do that. And that's why for us at the African Development Bank, we are investing heavily in IT infrastructure, to help. For example, you take Central Africa, it's very difficult in Central Africa to communicate. And so we invested over 300 million euros in Central Africa backbone, which is 2,500 kilometers of fiber optics that we do over there, which in fact is going to help to reduce increase internet access from 6% to 20%. Then you go to some of the Trans-Sahara fiber optic network, which is you're linking Algeria to Chad, to Niger, and to Nigeria, right? Where also is very, very difficult. So we've invested heavily in that particular infrastructure as well as the East Africa marine fiber optic system. Now that's what they need to be able to access speed of voice, data, things that make it quite competitive in the world today. But a point I want to make finally on that is the importance of really supporting the young people to take advantage of these platforms that we have. So for example, you were talking about the case of data. If you go on Google or save your information, Africa today does not have data centers. We do not control that. And so you hit it, it goes to California or somewhere else. We are not in charge of that. And so it's not what do you call it? The cloud is not a cloud. It's sitting somewhere else. Somebody else is making money from it. And so for us at African Development Bank, we've prioritized the need to invest heavily in data centers, even as we invest in digital entrepreneurship, which is going to be the key for Africa going forward. The global leader, that what you were saying there. I think basically we cannot achieve that unless we have a financing facility that works for young people. Young folks, what actually led to creating somebody like a Zuckerberg or Bill Gates and stuff like that? Because young people, they have a lot of great ideas. And they want to take on the world, and we want them to take on the world. But we don't put capital at risk for young people. How do we want them to get the financing that they need to turn their bright ideas into big businesses? And so I decided at the African Development Bank that we're going to do that. We're going to put our capital at risk for young people, for their ideas, because most of them don't want to work for somebody else. They want to have their own businesses. They want to be entrepreneurs. You've got Tony Olubelu here. He's doing a fantastic job. We're going to be working with him on that. That particular issue, Ada Osakwe is here, who sits on my presidential advisory committee to advise me as president about not just doing things for young people. What do they want? My vice president is here, Jennifer Blankett's in the audience. And so we decided that first and foremost is how do we de-risk the financial markets to lend to businesses and ideas of young people, right? So some of them will fail, but if 2, 3 of them work, just imagine what Africa will become. And so supporting entrepreneurship, I think it's going to be very, very vital to how we do this. We have a facility with the European Investment Bank that's called Boost Africa, which is 200 million euro facility to support early stage businesses, high risk businesses for entrepreneurs. And I think that's important. The other